Not so long ago, Rouvy got in touch and asked us if we could make a video showcasing some of their 1,500 augmented reality routes. They said there's flats, there's climbs, there's descents, there's even gravel. We promise you won't get bored. And so we said, yeah, go on then. And between us, we started trying to tick off the 50 countries that these routes are in. It wasn't too long though before I discovered something rather interesting. I realised that I can sustain way more power when I'm riding up a climb than I can on the flat. Now, how can that be? I did long suspect that this was the case out on the road in the real world, but now I'm useless on the flats even on a turbo? Well, I've done the research, sweated the sweat and talked to the bike boffins, so let's get into it. This is a flat road, in Iceland no less. I have actually ridden my bike in Iceland and the roads really are just like this. Lots of long, seemingly endless roads and big landscapes. Right now I'm riding around 200 watts and as you can tell from my talking, I'm not finding it all too easy. Put me on a climb though, there we go, here's a hill on one of Rouvy's latest Columbia routes and 200 watts suddenly seems a whole lot easier. This phenomenon is by no means exclusive to these roads. Whether I'm cycling in Madagascar, the Dolomites, Alpe d'Huez, Death Valley, Yokohama, or my local climbs, it's always the same. I can put out more power on the hills than I can on the flats. Why? Well, currently I don't have the answer for it, so here's someone who might be able to help.
The quite common thing that I get told by people coming to clinic is that I struggle to keep producing power when I go uphill, so it's the opposite way around.
Okay.
So I think that what that does, that leans into the fact that, of course, all human beings are different and we all achieve the task of pedaling in slightly different ways. So my guess would be with you, Jamie, is that with the front, because obviously going uphill, the only thing that really changes is the orientation of the bike and you. So the front end comes up a bit as you're experiencing on the treadmill, with the riser. And I just wonder whether that's engaging your ankle in a slightly different way. So what will quite often happen with that is that people lean into the pedal stroke a little bit more. So you can imagine on the down phase, it might be that because the front end's coming up slightly higher, that you might sit slightly further back therefore and then push more in a sort of like what we call a closed ankle position at the bottom, and that might be. So in other words, what I think's happening, sorry for long reply, is that going uphill is changing your position slightly and the orientation of a way you achieve, and it's actually helping you by producing a more efficient way of transferring power. So you're not more powerful, because you can't be, because your power is your power, isn't it? Really, but going uphill somehow leans into the most optimal biomechanical way for you to achieve that. Some other people are the exact opposite. I see quite a lot of people where, for example, if going uphill with the front end coming up, that closes up your hip a little bit more, and if they're not adapt, that can really rob you of power, and people often, the first thing they complain is not being able to maintain a big cadence, and that's because they start to have a big dead spot at the top of the cycling the profile, because it's closing up. But I think with you, what it's doing is it's more beneficial to you and optimal for you to be in that slightly backward position. And who knows, we all have slightly different biomechanics, and people, as you probably notice, if we go out and watch 100 people cycle, we all have slightly different ways we achieve some people are beautiful, we like, prancing white Spanish horses, pedaling like this. And then other people that locked out. The one thing I can say is that when you go into that locked out ankle position, we only really lose power beneath the knee. Okay. So power in cycling is generated in the quad and the glute mainly. All right. And we know that because of some interesting work we've done at British Cycling when I was there in biomechanics, is that our most efficient transfers of power are the amputee cyclists. And that kind of makes sense if you think about it. You've got a metal leg and ankle, and if you generate power in the quad, it all goes straight into pedal. So we lose power beneath. And I think I'm sort of positioned that when you go uphill, it lets you lock out your ankle in a more efficient way. And that's probably, that's my idea. It could also be like, is a bit more putting your glute, your hip extenders, your glutes in a more advantageous biomechanical position to contribute to the thing.
I've always been intrigued by this, how some people can put out more power on the flats, some people can put out more power on the climbs. And I guess I always wondered whether it was just having that resistance to push against, or whether some people say inertia, and I don't really understand all that inertia talk. And then you've got this bike fit. A lot of people use this phrase of a bike fit window.
Yeah.
And would that sort of be that I'm potentially on the edge of my window on a climb, and then when I'm on the flat, I potentially come out of that window?
Yeah, that could be it. Yeah, I think you make a very good point in that the resistance, increased resistance, yeah, that you have to work against. Perhaps that it literally could be down to. I've dived into the whole positional thing, but I think the resistance could also have the same effect of engaging your muscular system and locking up for example, your ankle in a lot better way. We know that do you know when it's sometimes harder to do. If you can imagine, we're on a really, really heavy leg press machine, and there's no weight on that, and it's very hot, very, very light. And doing that lots of times it won't engage your musculature. So it's almost like we know in the gym, for example, the ultimate exercises are always Olympic lifts. So thinking about squatting, yeah. You can do single, machine weights as much as you want in your legs. You'll never get as much strength stimulation out of that as you will from a squat. Now, a squat comes with all its risk of your back and everything, but the reason why we train people to do that is that it's a do or die exercise, isn't it? So if you go down with 120 kilos, you've got to come back up. Yeah. So I think if we take that analogy, it's like when we go uphill, well, you have to push this resistance to continue moving forward.
Otherwise,
and what we do know is like, you fire up more muscles when the challenge is harder, and potentially you're firing up more of your musculature in a more coordinated way. So those little ones that help, there's all those accessory roles of muscles where they're maintaining joint integrity, alignment, so on and so forth. So it could be that when you're on the flat, you're not challenged enough. So you just got to ride harder gears on the flat, Jamie.
That must be it, yeah. So I guess that leads us on to my final question. Whether people are like me and they can put out more power on the climbs, or whether people will find it easier to push out more power on the flats, what can we do to work on our weaknesses? Is it a case of looking at our bike fit, or just manning up and getting on with it?
The way I'd answer that is that I would expect there to be differences. I'm not surprised there is a difference for you. That's what I'm saying. So it's a bit like the left-right argument. Some people say, "Oh, I'm 52% on one leg and 48 on the other." You've probably had this question as well. And I wouldn't be worried about anything that was less than 5% on that for asymmetry, because all human beings are asymmetrical. So I think sometimes with this, if it's just a small difference, I would say, well, because remember, this is the great argument in terms of the position and stuff, is that in the Tour de France, if it's a time trial and it's slightly uphill, sometimes they'll change bikes. That's the only time you can do that. But in a stage, there's no time. So the position is a reflection of the best position for going uphill, downhill, and on the flat. But it's probably not optimal for any one of those. It's okay. the best fit, if you make sense. Yeah. So I think that you're the same. Is like, we don't want to change. You don't want to go and change your position to make the flat go and actually make it worse, if that makes sense. I think it's
sure.
So what I would say, I think if it's a significant thing, so if we were opposite way around with you, and I do see this quite often, people say I really struggle with cadence, and especially when I go uphill, cadence and power seems to drop off. That's probably suggesting that their position is right on the outside of the bike fit window, and for example, the hip might be closing up too much, either because the front end's too low, or saddle position's the wrong place, or crank length's too long. At which pace, I think if you're seeing significant drop-offs, they should examine position. Once again, me, crank length often comes down to it. So some people notice as they age, and for example, our hips get stiffer, that they need to manipulate things like gearing and crank length to be able to perform like they used to do when they're younger. But your case is quite interesting, that it's the opposite way around, and it suggests that I don't know, how would you make go power but more on the flat? I think probably just seeing if you it might not be just going to higher gears. It might just be that maybe you're just very good at going uphill, Jamie. Most people are better at one thing, There are many, many people who are brilliant at climbing that you've never seen in the Tour de France because they can't descend for toffee, So often people forget that going very fast downhill is one of the biggest limiting factors to being a successful road riding, and I, for one, would never be, because I'm scared to death of going that fast and going downhill. So I think, in summary, I think I'd say it's like horses for courses here. It's like, can I learn to, it's almost like investigate and think, oh, I might just try something different on the flat that seems to mimic going uphill and see if your power went up, but don't lose the good stuff, which is you are
Yeah.
engaged in going uphill more powerful. And like I say, it's a bit, I think I'll put it in the same sort of room as you don't have to be the same power left and right. And hardly anybody is in the world, right? It's very, very normal to have one leg stronger than the other. And trying to make that the same can often bring the whole overall thing down. So in my case for you, I'd be a bit reticent to take away your increased power climbing and make you more similar on the flat. I've got a feeling it would bring the whole thing down generally. Does that make sense a little bit? Because we're producing a compromise. Sorry for being so wishy-washy, but it's a really interesting question.
No, it sounds like I just need to A, accept it, and B, accept that, everyone's different, whether they're climbing. And it was really interesting what you said about the optimum setup for different things. And like you say, you can't have one setup is unlikely to be optimal for both climbing, descending, and on the flats.
Yeah.
And actually, I think I've got quite a nice balanced setup for those three things. And if I was doing hill climbs, some of the hill climb setups are proper wacky, aren't they? And in the same way as if someone was on the flat, they'd probably have a completely different setup again. So I think it's just a case of people need to find that setup that works in a variety of situations, and accepting that there might be some minor differences between the scenarios.
Exactly. I mean, one of the most common things we see is with people is a loss of power in climbing, especially on like long European climbs that we're not used to over here. It's literally like, if the back starts to become uncomfortable, and that of course being uncomfortable affects power production and performance. So you're absolutely right. I think you just got to find the best compromise, as it were, for a sport. Because the evidence is there. You're right. If you go to the hill climb championships, there's some amazing, I think, really innovative setups there, isn't there? Where people are coming.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. It's generally like a very short stem, isn't it? Normally, or something like that. But but I suppose the hill climb is a little bit extreme. They're normally very, very, very steep.
Yes.
Something that I personally am completely useless at doing at 100 kilos.
You won't find me at any of them anytime soon either. So there we have it. You're probably stronger on the flats or the climbs for a variety of reasons, but it's not worth stressing about. And if you want to be stronger everywhere, then there's one proven way to do it. A bit of good old-fashioned training. Thank you very much to Rouvy for sponsoring this video, and they were certainly right about one thing. There's more routes than you can shake a sweaty towel at. Right, I'm off to New Zealand now. See you later. Let us know if you're stronger on the climbs or in the flats down in the comment section below, as well as which Rouvy route you'd most like to ride. As always, if you enjoyed this content, then please give it a like, subscribe to the channel for all the latest bikes and tech, and we'll see you next time.